In Toronto today, one of Ontario Northland's new passenger rail trains was unveiled. The service was cancelled nearly 14 years ago.
Canada, it's over an advertisement from Ontario's government that's been playing on American networks.
In Toronto today, Ontario Northland revealed one of its new passenger rail trains. The service had been cancelled nearly 14 years ago, but the provincial government says this launch brings them closer to fulfilling a long-standing promise. On the surface, it looked like a routine transportation announcement, but beneath it was a much bigger story about power, trade, and control. Imagine this. For more than a century, Canada has acted like a delivery worker who needs permission from a neighbor for every single shipment. Its grain, minerals, and natural wealth have often had to pass through American railways and ports. Fees were paid. Schedules were set elsewhere. Control quietly shifted south of the border. This idea was even spelled out bluntly in an Ontario government advertisement that recently aired on American television networks. A rail line most Canadians stopped thinking about decades ago has suddenly moved to the center of a quiet but serious power shift. And this did not happen by accident. In November 2025, standing in Winnipeg beside Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced $51 million in upgrades to the Hudson Bay Railway. The language he used mattered. This was not described as basic maintenance or a local repair project. It was framed as the foundation of a new trade corridor, one that would send Canadian resources directly to Europe without relying on American routes at all. For more than 100 years, Western Canada had little choice. Grain, minerals, and other exports moved south first because that was where capacity existed. American railways controlled schedules. American ports controlled access. Fees were charged at every step, and Canadian producers paid them because no competing route had the scale to challenge that system. The northern route to Churchill technically existed. It stretched nearly 1,300 kilometers across permafrost and muskeg. But chronic underfunding, difficult terrain, and seasonal limits kept it on the margins of global trade. It was seen as unreliable, risky, and outdated. That calculation changed when political pressure from Washington hardened attitudes in Ottawa. After Donald Trump openly questioned Canadian sovereignty and threatened trade penalties, Mark Carney came to power with a mandate to push back. Instead of accepting old constraints, his government looked again at the railway most of the industry had written off. With a combined $262 million in federal and provincial investment, the plan is to upgrade the Hudson Bay Railway to full Class 1 standards. That upgrade unlocks a corridor capable of moving grain, fertilizer, critical minerals, and even energy straight to the Arctic and onward to European markets. For years, American logistics firms dismissed this route as irrelevant. Now it is being positioned as a channel that could redirect hundreds of billions of dollars in trade over the next decade. That raises serious questions. How did a forgotten railway become a strategic weapon? And what does this mean for American influence over North American trade flows? For nearly a century, the Hudson Bay Railway stood as a symbol of ambition that never fully delivered. It was carved through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent with the goal of giving Western Canada a direct path to global markets. Built during the 1920s and 1930s, the idea was simple. Prairie grain would move north to the port of Churchill, cross Hudson Bay, and head straight to Europe without detouring through American ports or the Panama Canal. On paper, it promised lower costs, shorter distances, and independence from foreign-controlled infrastructure. In reality, the railway spent most of its life fighting nature and economics at the same time. The terrain alone was brutal. Large sections crossed permafrost that shifted with the seasons, slowly bending tracks and weakening foundations. Muskeg swallowed ballast and rails, forcing constant repairs. Extreme cold cracked steel and stressed bridges. Flooding regularly wiped out long sections of track. Even when trains ran, strict weight limits and slow speeds kept capacity low. The shipping season through Hudson Bay was also short. Ice-free conditions often lasted only 4 months, sometimes less. That made large-scale exports risky. Meanwhile, southern routes offered year-round access, established ports, and predictable logistics. Farmers learned that shipping south was faster and more reliable, even if it cost more. By the 1990s, patience had run out. The federal government no longer viewed the railway as a strategic asset and looked for a way to get rid of it. That effort ended with a deal that revealed how little confidence remained. The railway and the port of Churchill were sold to Omnitrax, a private American company, for $1. Not $1 million, not $1,000, just $1. The message was clear. The line was seen as a burden, not an opportunity. Omnitrax invested little. Maintenance was delayed. Conditions worsened. When severe flooding in 2017 destroyed major sections of track, operations stopped entirely. The railway sat unusable for more than a year, cutting Churchill off from surface transportation and exposing how fragile the system had become. Then, in 2018, ownership changed again. A consortium made up of 41 First Nations communities and northern Manitoba municipalities stepped in and purchased the railway and port, forming the Arctic Gateway Group. Many analysts saw the move as symbolic. Indigenous ownership carried political meaning, but few believed it would turn the railway into a serious trade corridor. The assumption was that it would continue serving local needs only. What almost no one expected was how quickly the strategic environment would change. Railways are not just lines on a map. Their value depends on standards. In North America, track quality is measured through classifications. Class 1 sits at the top, designed for heavy freight, higher speeds, and maximum efficiency. The Hudson Bay Railway was nowhere near that level. It operated under lower standards with strict limits that made modern freight operations impossible. Serious exporters could not rely on it. That changed in November 2025 when federal and provincial governments announced $262 million to rebuild the line to full Class 1 standards. This was not routine maintenance. It was a complete reconstruction. The plan includes stabilizing the roadbed over permafrost, installing modern rail and ties rated for heavy loads, reinforcing bridges and culverts, and deploying advanced monitoring technology. Ground-penetrating radar will map subsurface conditions. LiDAR will produce precise track models. Drones will conduct inspections. Sensors will track movement in real time. Artificial intelligence will analyze the data to predict failures before they happen. These upgrades dramatically change what the railway can handle. Heavy freight cars carrying grain, potash, minerals, or industrial equipment become viable. Unit trains moving massive volumes suddenly make economic sense. Reliability improves, which is critical for companies planning long-term supply chains. Once a railway reaches Class 1 standards, it sends a clear message. This route is permanent, it is capable, and it is open for serious business. Grain sits at the top of the list. Saskatchewan and Manitoba produce enormous volumes of wheat, canola, and specialty crops. Today, most of that output flows west to Vancouver or south through American ports. Churchill offers a much shorter route to Europe. With upgraded rail and port capacity, exports through Hudson Bay could reach millions of tons per year. Potash follows closely. Saskatchewan dominates global potash production, with about 95% exported. For decades, much of it moved through American logistics networks. Agreements already signed by companies like Genesis Fertilizers show how that pattern can change. Every ton shipped through Churchill is revenue no longer flowing through American railways and ports. Critical minerals add another layer. Northern regions hold large deposits of nickel, lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements. These materials are essential for modern industry and clean energy. A Class 1 rail connection to Churchill allows bulk shipments to reach Europe directly. The Arctic Gateway Group has already shipped critical minerals for 2 consecutive seasons, proving the concept works. Energy projects could expand the corridor further. Proposals include liquefied natural gas, hydrogen in the form of ammonia, and even electricity transmission. Alberta has openly discussed an energy corridor to Churchill. If built, Western Canadian energy could reach global markets without touching American terminals. Churchill also plays a key role in Arctic resupply. Northern communities depend on seasonal shipments for essentials. Improved rail capacity lowers costs, improves reliability, and strengthens Canada's presence in its own Arctic territory. When all these flows are combined, tens of millions of tons could move annually through infrastructure that bypasses American control. Southern routes will not disappear. Vancouver remains essential, but the balance of power changes. For generations, Canadian exporters had no alternative. Fees and priorities were set elsewhere. A Class 1 railway to Churchill breaks that dependency. Companies can choose routes based on cost and efficiency, not necessity. Once supply chains adapt, they rarely reverse. Every shipment that moves north reduces American leverage, and there is no legal or political tool to stop it. Canada is simply investing in its own infrastructure and using it. Climate change complicates the picture. Warming temperatures destabilize permafrost, increasing engineering challenges, but they also extend the shipping season. Where Churchill once operated 4 months a year, the season now approaches 5 or 6 months, with icebreaker support pushing it even further. What once looked reckless now looks strategic. Eliminating billions in foreign logistics costs changes the math. Control over infrastructure proves as important as control over resources. A railway long dismissed as obsolete is becoming a pillar of Canadian trade independence, and that shift may reshape North American trade for decades to come. What do you think? Let us know in the comments, subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next one.